brought to you by the San Luis Obispo County Office of Education and the SLOCO Arts Collaborative. Welcome to Touching Bass with your host, me, Alyssa, where I'm going to teach you how to be a great bass player, bandmate, and musician.
Ba-dum, 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 boom, boom, ba-dum, boom, 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 boom.
So you want to learn how to play the bass, or maybe you just want to know how it works musically. If you do learn how to play the bass, you will be very popular among musicians because there's always a band looking for a bass player. One wonderful thing about this instrument is the simplicity of getting started. It's not flashy like the guitar and doesn't necessarily take the endless hours of practice that other instruments can take to sound good. It can be as simple or as complex as you like it. Still, it is going to help if you have a basic understanding of song structure and music theory. In fact, there are many bassists throughout history that are phenomenal songwriters. Think Paul McCartney, Brian Wilson, Bootsy Collins, Gene Simmons, Roger Waters, and Sting. All bassists, all great songwriters. It's a popular saying that the bass is easy to learn, hard to master. I can tell you right now, it's very true. I joined a band only a few months after I started learning, and you can too. If you want to play in a band, but you've never even touched an instrument, the bass is the perfect place to start. Now, let's start with some bass anatomy. This right here is the body of the bass. This long bit here is the neck. This, the top, is the headstock. These are the tuning pegs. Here, attached to the tuning pegs, are the strings, obviously. And you go all the way over here, and this is the bridge. This is also where the strings are attached. Some adjustments here can change what we call action, which is the distance of the strings to the body and the neck. With high action, you will have to press harder with your fingers, but you will get a clearer tone. And with low action, it's inverse. You won't have to press as hard, but you may not have such a clear tone and you might hear more buzz. We'll get into tone more. I should also add that right next to the bridge, we have the pickups, and those pick up the vibrations from the strings and then turn them into electrical signals for the amp to read. Down here, we have some very important knobs. This is the volume knob. It's pretty obvious what that one does, right? These here are some tone knobs where you can change the character of your sound. Perhaps you like it warm and round, more like that. Or you might like it bright and sharp. That's not it. Like that. Hear the difference? Especially up there. You also might just like it somewhere in the middle, kind of like me. That's up to you. Experiment around and see what you like. Here we have the input jack for your cord, which is going to attach to your bass amp. You will want to play with a bass amp, and you'll want to play amplified because you need to get used to hearing yourself. You've got some tone knobs here on the amp as well, where you can really adjust the sound that you're hearing. Here is the strap, and you can just lengthen or shorten that to your own comfort. There are many rock and roll bassists that like to keep their bass hanging very low, but I don't recommend that because back injuries are a no bueno. There's 4 strings on your standard bass, and they're the same as the lowest 4 strings on a guitar. There's E, A, D, and G. Mine has 5 strings, as you could probably tell. So this one has a low B at the bottom. So with this bass, we have B, E, A, D, and G. We call this string the bottom string because it's got the lowest pitch. And this string is the top string because it's got the highest pitch. Therefore, if someone directs you to your bottom string, they mean bottom in terms of sound. It's always this one, the one closest to you. So to be clear, the bottom string is closest to you, and it's bottom because it's pitched lower than the others. Now here's the strings on a guitar starting from the bottom. E, A, D, G, B, and E. The bottom four are in the same order that they appear on the bass. That is until you get to the guitar's high B and then the high E at the top. So the guitar has a low E at the bottom and a high E at the top. That's right, both the same notes. Remember, my bass has a low B at the bottom and a G at the top. The guitar has a high B as its second string, but both instruments are actually utilizing the same set of notes. The bass, as opposed to the guitar, covers those same notes pitched much lower. The notes are lower because the strings are thicker and specifically designed to have this sound. So remember, thicker strings equals lower sound. The guitar and the bass may look similar, but they're very different in terms of job. The bass will almost always play one note at a time, while the guitar can and does often play many notes at a time. The bass is an instrument that can be hard to pick out in a full band because the notes it plays are so low, but you definitely will notice when it's not there. Let me show you. Here's a song. And here's what it sounds like when the bass falls out. Do you hear how the sound is much more full when you have something to cover the low end? Now, we want the bass notes to fit with the rest of the music, so it's important to make sure your bass is tuned correctly. What does it mean to be in tune? That just means that all of your strings are tuned to the right notes, depending on your tuning. We're using what's called standard tuning. There are many different non-standard tunings you can use, but we can talk about that later. This is a tuner, and if you don't have one, you can always get one at your local music shop, or you can download one for free online at the App Store. We turn on the tuner and then hit each string. It shows if the note that the string is tuned to is too sharp or flat. Sharp is code for too high, and flat is code for too low. So if a note is sharp, it's higher than we want it, and if it's flat, it's lower than we want it. These terms sharp and flat will come back, so it's best to integrate these into your vocabulary now. When we tune, we use the tuning pegs to make the strings go tighter or looser. That one's right. That one is too high, too sharp, I should say. So now I'm making the string a little looser. Ideally, we want to tune up to the note. There we go. We want to tune up to the note because the strings can continue to stretch. There we go. D string's about right, and our G is a little flat, but not anymore. And it was sharp. All right, there we go. Tune up to it a little bit. There we go. Tighter makes the sound go higher, and looser makes it go lower. Once all of the strings are tuned correctly, then it's time to play. To play the bass, you traditionally pluck with your pointer finger and your middle finger, like this. Make sure your plucking motion goes until your finger hits the string below it, as that will help to keep that lower string from vibrating. Watch. Playing this way is called fingerstyle. Some players even use 3 fingers, but that's usually people that want to play really fast metal music. But you can get all the speed you need with 2, trust me. You can also play with a pick if you prefer that way. I think you get a better tone and speed using fingerstyle, but playing instruments is about expression, so you can choose how you want to play and express yourself. If you choose fingerstyle, it may take some time to develop some control and consistency, so don't worry if you don't get it right away. With some practice, it will eventually feel very natural. There are 3 main techniques to right hand position. I like to use the floating thumb technique, so I'll talk about that one first. Essentially, your thumb will move depending on which string you're plucking. The floating thumb allows you to silence the vibrations of the other strings with your thumb. This is pretty important, especially when you go higher up. These big, thick strings can make a lot of noise when they vibrate, and any kind of moving air can cause them to do so. Because they're amplified so much by this big, lovely amp, you can hear it if they're not dampened somehow. Another benefit to this approach is it will help you avoid wrist injury and carpal tunnel. You always want to keep a mostly straight but relaxed wrist, and this technique allows you to do so. It can take a little more time to develop, but if you start now with good technique, then things will be easier for you down the road. Your bandmates and your wrist will thank you. Another option is the movable anchor technique. With this method, your thumb will still move like in the floating thumb technique, but it will use a string as an anchor for your plucking fingers. For example, if you are playing the D string, your thumb will rest on the A string. If you play the G string, then your thumb will rest on the D. If you feel like you need somewhere to put your thumb when you play, then this is a good option for you. The last one is the fixed anchor technique. Many bass players use this by either keeping their thumb anchored to their bottom string or to their pickup like this. I don't recommend this technique as it can hamper your mobility later by making it difficult to jump to the higher strings quickly. It's also difficult to keep your wrist straight and relaxed using only this technique. Once you've got your right hand ready, or left hand if you're a lefty, it's time to hit the strings. When you pluck the strings, you can make the notes long, like this. That's called legato. Or short, like this, called staccato. Just think long equals legato and short equals staccato. You can very easily use your left hand to stop the sound. Here. Fun fact, these are actually Italian words. Bet you didn't expect a language lesson here. You will find Italian language terms all over music. Legato means tied together, and you can see 2 long legato notes are tied together sonically. Staccato means to detach, and here you can see that the notes are detached from each other by the spaces. You can stop the sound with either hand, but often you will change the note length with your left hand. Let's try an exercise where we are just hitting the open E string in staccato fashion. Just like that. Yeah. Now, let's pluck that open D string in legato fashion. Of course, using proper right hand technique. Just nice and easy. So far, we have just used the open strings. An open string means we aren't changing the sound with our finger. We're just letting it ring out to the note we tuned it to. Do you see how the neck is divided into squares? These are called frets, and you can actually number them. All of them together is the fretboard. We use the frets to change the sound and get different notes. Getting different notes with the frets are where your left hand technique really comes in. Unless you're left-handed, of course, and then for you it's right hand technique. We want to keep our left hand, also known as our fretting hand, mostly relaxed and with a straight wrist when possible. We only want to press as hard as necessary, which isn't too hard at all. You never need to press as hard as you can because that's just going to eventually lead to injury. If you feel like you have to press very hard on your bass, then it might be time to take it into the guitar shop and get the action lowered. We're going to bend our fingers and make a sort of claw in which our ring finger is assisted by our pinky, like this. Unless we need to stretch out the pinky to hit a specific note, we will often keep it with the ring finger because that helps to keep the wrist straight. Think of the ring and pinky finger as attached, like a claw. The fingers should be curled and kept close to the strings with the thumb on the back of the neck, like so. When you press down to get a note, you will want to press close to the fret mark without actually being on top of it. That will likely cause the note to buzz. We want clear, nice notes. We don't want to press in the middle either because we will have to press too hard. We work smarter, not harder on the bass. For proper left hand technique, moving up the bass, we want to utilize the strength of all of the fingers so that our small fingers don't get tired. I start with the pointer finger like this, and when I go up in pitch, I will put my middle finger down and leave my pointer finger down to help. Now I'll go back to the pointer finger. When I want to move up a whole step, I will put the middle ring and pinky down by making the claw I mentioned earlier. This way we can better avoid injury. Here is something I see new bassists try to do. This is what we don't do. We keep them all close to the strings, with the stronger fingers helping the smaller ones. Not individual fingers pressing. Let's do an exercise using all of the fingers with proper technique. We will stay plucking on the same string and use our new claw shape to move up the neck. Start on the open E and move up like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just like that, good job. When you move up or down a fret to the next pitch, we call that moving a half step or a semitone. So here, I'm moving up a half step or a semitone. Here, I'm moving down a semitone. In our exercise, we started from E and moved up a semitone or half step with each count. Moving a whole step or a whole tone means moving 2 of these frets like this. Here, I'm moving up a whole step. And here, I'm moving down a whole step. In the case of the piano, moving up or down one key is moving a half step. So that'll be from white here to black. in this case. Here's my D going to a D sharp. That's moving up a half step. In the case of my D note here, if I want to move down a half step, then I'm going to this black note right here, which is the D flat, also known as the C sharp. If I want to move up a whole step from D, then I'm going to go here to the E. If I want to move down a whole step from D, then I'm going to go right here to the C. Take this key for example, this B. Here I'm moving up a half step to the C. And if I want to go back down, I'll move down a half step back to the B. Now, if I want to move from B up a whole step, I'm going to go here to C sharp. So here's my B to C sharp. Now if I want to go down a whole step from the C sharp to the B, it's there. Now that we have good left-hand technique and we know about moving half steps and whole steps, we can return to the fretboard. Knowing the string pitches and how to tune them is a great start, but you also need to know all of the notes on your fretboard. This can sound like a lot at first, but all you have to do is start small. You don't need to know the entire fretboard today, but eventually you will want to, and it will get infinitely easier the more you practice. In Western music, there are 12 note pitches that we name, and then they just repeat themselves in higher versions. Listen as I go up, moving a half step each time, starting on the A string. These notes are A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, and now we're back to A. Let's do that again, starting from the D string this time. What is that? D, right? Now we have D sharp. This one is E. That's F. F sharp. G. G sharp. A sharp, B, C, C sharp, and back to D. Notice the pattern yet? Now some pitches or notes actually have two names. A, B, C, D, E, F, and G are called natural notes, and their names don't change. There are exceptions to this rule, but don't worry about that now. Music is a lot like the English language. There are rules, there are always exceptions too. So you have natural notes, but remember those notes that had sharp in the name? Well, there are a few notes in between our natural notes, and they are called sharps and flats. They have two names depending on their context. Let me show you those notes again, but this time we're going to start on the higher A, on the A string. Here. Here we have A. We have A flat, G, G flat, F, E, E flat, D, D flat, C, B, B flat, And now we're back to A.
Here's a very clearly marvelous drawing I did of my bass. That is a joke. I am aware it is very poor in quality. These are all of the notes on my bass, at least the natural notes I've labeled, and the notes that have two names I've left blank, and we're gonna get into those more right now.
Take this note for example. We call it an A sharp or a B flat because it's in between the A and the B. Remember when we talked about sharp meaning too high and flat meaning too low? Well, A sharp means a semitone higher than A, and B flat is a semitone lower than B. They end up being the same note. Sometimes it helps to visualize the piano with the sharps and flats. The white keys are natural notes with the fixed names A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and back to A. Here we have C sharp, D sharp, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, and back to C sharp. But do you remember their other names? Here we also have D flat, E flat, G flat, A flat, and B flat. Now when I say bass, you know I mean this kind of bass, here. But there are other types of basses. What I play is the electric bass, and they come in all shapes and sizes. Typically you need an amp to hear the notes, and I'm using one right now, obviously. Here's what it sounds like without. Hard to hear, right? There is also the acoustic bass, also known as the stand-up bass, and it looks like this. This one you don't necessarily need an amp unless you're playing with a loud band or in a room that doesn't have great acoustics. This instrument is much older than the electric bass, and it actually is its predecessor. See these strings? It has the same strings as the bass does, at least the 4-string bass. E, A, D, and G. It even sounds very similar, but the neck and body do look very different. So the frets are actually here on the electric bass to provide precisional notes, but with a stand-up bass you actually have no frets. You have to use your ear to pick out the right note. And muscle memory can help too. There are fretless electric basses as well that have a sound more similar to the stand-up bass. Both the electric bass and the stand-up bass will provide the same role in the band. The bass is the glue that holds together both the melodic parts, which encompass those notes I showed you, and the rhythmic parts. You need to play the right notes, and you need to play them in time, which means no rushing and no slowing down. The bass should be the solid rhythmic anchor for other more melodic instruments like the guitar or the piano. So what is melody? The scientific definition is melody is a succession of single musical notes in a rhythm that is satisfying. But the simple definition is it's the main part of a song. The main part, often sung part of a song. Here's a melody I bet you'll recognize. I can play melodies on the bass too, but its primary job in a band is rhythmic. Melodic instruments are usually going to be more focused on playing the melody. Now, what is rhythm? It's music's pattern in time. Time is very important here. See what happens when I play that melody out of time? It's a lot less recognizable, isn't it? The bass is responsible for highlighting the rhythm and providing groove, that part that makes you shake your head to the song and bounce. We're going to go into more of what that means in the next part, so stay tuned. I should probably turn this on, huh? Did I do it right?
Nope.
Ba-dum, 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 boom, boom, ba-dum, boom, 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 boom.